In this next part on using arrays in JavaScript, we're going to look at a few more ways that we can access the contents of the array and display them on screen. So one of the things I want to do first is I'm going to take a look at using what are called string templates or template literals. And we can see that. I'm just putting the link here. We'll go take a look at the page with it. So we have all these different ways of referring to it. And what we're doing is, instead of utilizing the standard single quotes, we're using the backtick, which is on most keyboards found right below the escape key in the top left corner of your keyboard. So you have these kind of angled hash marks. So it's called the backtick. And what it allows you to do when you do it is you can now put variables and other JavaScript items inside that. So you can use a variable, like in this case we have variables of first name, last name, and inside, using backticks, not single quotes, I use a $ and then curly braces, and then I can reference that variable and it's going to show up on screen. So if we take a look at it, we have the name here, the variable inside of the backticks, and then we're able to show that on screen. So this is a way that I think is a little bit nicer and the code a little bit cleaner than having to use quotes and plus signs and because essentially you can just write out what you're trying to do. You put it in the backticks or template literal and it works a little bit better. So in this case, what it would look like, it would be p inner, and we're using inner HTML because later on in this activity it will be necessary for us to be passing in some actual HTML tags. So that's why I'm using inner HTML instead of simply using text content, which is often the preferred option. So here I put in my two backticks so we can see, looking on the line above, that it's angled, it's not vertical. Again, it's right below the escape key in the top left corner of your keyboard. So now I will say my super backpack contains, we'll do the colon this time, and as I said, we use a $, curly brace, close curly brace, and inside of that I now put the JavaScript that I want to run. So backpack.join, and we'll use now a single quote, not a backtick, comma, and space. So it's going to be very much the same kind of thing. Now if we save this, we'll see that nothing changed here because we're still looking at the original file. So I'm just going to update what's there. If I don't remember the file name, I can just click here and look at what's on the server now because I saved this new one into, so I'm breaking these into separate files. You can just continue with the one you're working on if you want, but I'm keeping it separate so it will be easier to track what is happening. So my super backpack contains colon, boom, 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 there it is. So we can see how it's working quite effectively. So I'm just going to comment that out. We're not using it anymore. Just want to leave in what we have. So this is one way to represent the contents that are there. So it's a good start with what we're doing. Now, another way that we could do this, if I want to, say, view this, my list of items on separate lines, so it's not in one long line, because later on it's going to become a little bit more useful for us to do that. What I can do, and I'm going to create a little block of code here that we'll be reusing. So part of what we're doing as we are learning about arrays is we're going to be creating some pieces, some chunks of code that we're going to be able to then plug into functions that we will be using as our program grows in scope and complexity. But again, as always, start simple, start small, make sure it works before you try and build a rocket to the moon, because if you go too big too soon and you don't know your parts are working, you're going to be really unhappy with how it all comes together. So now I'm going to make a section here. We'll say let backpack contents. And there's no reason not to use long variable names because we do have code completion here in Visual Studio Code and most other code editors, so you might as well. So I'll say my backpack contains colon, and now what I'm going to do is just put in a line break like that. So that's the starting text string. Now I will use a simple for loop, and I can go down and choose for loop here. I'm going to change where it says index. I'll just change that to I, because we'll use this I for counting through our loop. Then I hit the tab key, and now you can see how it's highlighting array. My array that I'm using is my backpack. Now, a property arrays have is length, and that is how many items are in it. So we're going to go through this loop the exact number of times that it has items in that array. So if there are 5 items in the array, the for loop will go through. The first time I is 0, the next time is 2, 3, 4, and then I becomes 5. 5 is now going to be greater than backpack's length, so it won't run any further. So that's why we start I equals 0. Now, what we can do is I'm going to just change where it says element, and I just think, I'm naming this so it seems a little bit better for me. And I will want this value here in a moment, but I'm going to start out and put in some backticks here. And what I want to do is I want to, so I'm using square brackets, but this is string. This is just text I'm looking at. It's not inside curly braces or anything. I just want it to show me something, and what I want it to show me is the value of I. So I want to see I right there. Then I'm just going to move this over, put it inside the backtick, and well, it's highlighted because this text is currently highlighted. If I do a parenthesis, square brace, or curly brace, it will put it around both of them, which is exactly what I want. I'm just going to put a space there, and I'll put the $sign, so now it tells me it's going to give me that item. And then what I can do is say backpack contents, missed my arrow key. And what we're going to do is add to the string. So each time we go through, so the first time backpack contents is my backpack contains line break. And then we're going to add to it using plus equals item text. Now it's adding this value the first time through. So the very first time through, I is 0. That means I in my array, 0 corresponds to jacket. So then it will say my backpack contains jacket. And what we probably want to do, because we're not using join anymore, is I want to put in a line break. So then we say line break, and then the next time through it will add in and say I is equal to 1. So that'll give me compass, then it will give me knife matches, and we'll see how this all works. And this updates backpack contents. We're not using that anymore up here, so we're going to just ditch it. And then down here, well, I could have just moved it down, but I'd rather just start over here. I'll just say is equal to backpack contents. So what we've done is we're going to use this for loop to go through the array, and it's now going to add them to it. Now let's see what we get. My backpack contains at position 0, compass, knife, pillow. Now if we undo some of these things or change them, if we get rid of, now I don't need a pillow because I'm tough and sleep on the ground. I'm going to get rid of pop here because I don't want to lose it. Now let's see what it looks like. So now we can see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, jacket, compass, knife, matches, sleeping bag. Okay. So it's now showing me that by utilizing our template literal, it makes it a little bit easier to write this out. If I wanted to write this out without doing that, if I said item text is going to be equal to, and then what I would have to do is quote square bracket plus I plus quote square bracket plus pack I plus quote bracket br slash close bracket. So then I have to make sure my quotes and pluses are all lining up, and I would make an argument that line 38 is much harder to read and much easier to mess up than line 39 using the string literal or template literal. So you can do it as you wish, but moving forward I'm going to be using template literals more often than using just string concatenation. That's where I'm putting things together using pluses. And I'm not a big fan of that because it's really easy to miss quotes and miss your pluses as you try and put it, and then you get error messages. So both of those will achieve the exact same output, but I believe this is easier to read. We can see the JavaScript is always inside curly braces with the $, and then we only need one set of quotes. So to that end, I think it makes it a little bit nicer as we work through it. So we're going to leave this down at the bottom here. This is now accessing all of the items in our array. I'm going to now work with accessing the array, and this time I'm going to use a for loop to search for an item in my array. So once again, the code completion on this is fabulous for writing this out, so it does make it a little bit easier. So we need backpack I, but what we're going to be saying is if backpack I, we're going to check and find out, is it equal to knife? So we're looking for the knife, and if it is, then right now we're just going to log out. So console.log. So we can type it out. Otherwise, if you just type log, it logs it out to the console. Sometimes you'll have to arrow down to the log that's showing up. And now what I'm going to say is backtick found knife at, and then $ curly brace I, well, not O, I, and close backtick. Right, semicolon, that's optional. You can use it if you want. It just defaults with those. Whoops, my backtick needs to be inside the parenthesis, which it, I still need my backtick, not my single quote, needs to be inside the parenthesis. That's why my brace was showing up red. So I look down, I'm like, something's not right. So I'm here, and now I can see the red, so it's telling me it's unhappy with me. It's very subtle, but it was enough that I noticed, oops, I put it in the wrong spot. So we have console log, so parenthesis to parenthesis, backtick to backtick, inside, curly brace to curly brace, $. All right. Now, if we don't find the knife on the element, I want it to log out. And once you do console log, the next time you hit L on the keyboard, boom, there it is. Speeds things up greatly. And now I'll say backtick, no knife at, And it's repeating the same process. This is one thing about coding is there is, some amount of rinse and repeat. All right, so let's save that and see what happens. And now we can see it did a whole bunch of output. We have 5 items in our array. No knife at 0, no knife at 1, found knife at 2, no knife at 3, no knife at 4. So we can see we're able to find it. Now sometimes when we're going through arrays, we may say, okay, if we find something, we want to be done. So, well, I don't really need that or not, I can. And now by saying break, what it says is, hey, I'm going through this, and then if I come to this break, it stops running the loop. It gets us out of that loop and stops it from running. So we can see no knife, found knife. So if the knife was at position 0, it would run once. If it was at 5, it would run all the way through. If we didn't have a knife, it would go through all the elements and we would say no knife, no knife, no knife, no knife. So if we know we're looking for a specific element and we can know that that is the only way it's going to be referenced, that's okay. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding an input field so we can type in commands to our program, and then the program will compare that command to something that's in our array, in this case even multiple arrays, and then it will determine, hey, that's an allowed thing, that's an item, it will look for it. But what it means is we might not always phrase things quite the same. We might start using natural language instead of just abbreviated short things. And when we do that, it might not be as capable of finding what we have typed. If I click on a line number, it highlights that line. So when I have an extra line space, if I want to get rid of it, I just click on the number instead of trying to get my mouse to, where do I click? Do I click out here? Do I click here? Where do I click to highlight? It's much easier just to click on the number. Or if I want to get rid of a whole line, click there, boom, it's highlighted. I can hit delete, or I can move it, or whatever I'm trying to do. Mini sidebar there. So we've looked at using the for loop. It can go through things in a couple of different ways, which is pretty nice. Now, another thing that we have at our disposal when we are working with arrays is we can check and see if something is available to us, and then find out, the index of that item. So instead of using a for loop to go through it, we can do it a little bit differently. So imagine we're in the woods. We have our phone, it has a compass in it, it has a GPS, and we're using that. We're like, why do I need to actually bring a physical compass? So let's find out if we remembered to pack our compass. So I'm just going to say if backpack, not backpack contents. So if backpack dot, and what we can say is index of. So instead of having to use our for loop to go through our entire array, we can say, hey, let's check the index of a particular item. And I will say compass. We're going to find out if that index is not equal to -1. What that means is if it is equal to -1, that means it did not find compass in our array. But if it did find compass in the array, then it would return the index of as a number. So what we will do, I know that sounded a little bit convoluted, but I'm going to say I'll just say let IDX, short for index, equal to backpack index of compass, and then we'll just log it out before we do anything else. So we can see, okay, it found it at position 1. But we don't really need to know that. What we can do is we can say backpack splice, and now splice takes 2 values, the index number and how many items from that index onward we want to get rid of. So I will just say index, again, because I don't need to know it, and I just want to get rid of one item here. So now when we do that, save this, okay, if we look, our array lost the compass. I'm going to comment out that splice again, look, see compass is there, and it was at position 1 here. So we put, whoop. Now backticks, one thing about it is unlike other items, when something's highlighted, it doesn't display it. So I'm just putting this in because it's nice to have our items actually be more than just a single reference. So now if we go here, splice found out in index 1, there we go. And now we can get rid of it. So notice it got rid of 1, now we have knife matches. So let's now say, let's get rid of 2 items. Now if I look, it goes jacket matches sleeping bag. Let's try 3 items. What happens? Jacket, sleeping bag. 4 items. 5. So it's going to just try and delete everything else, but there's nothing else to delete. It doesn't fail, but it gets rid of that item plus 4 more, if 4 more happen to exist. Again, if we just want to do the single item, we put a 1 there. If we don't put a number, then it is going to fail here. So we've now looked at how we can find things by using a for loop to go through the whole array. We can use indexOf to find something without having to loop through the array. We just want to find out if it's not equal to -1, that means it found it. Now what I could do here is do an else, and with this we'll just log out a statement and say item not found. And now let's just watch this. If I just put a capital C here, item not found, our array is now untouched. Notice, capital C, lowercase c. So it turns out it is case sensitive. And that, along with a few other things, are what we will be looking at in the next videos.